When the Dominion came, the heavens burned violet. Serenya Vaen watched from the cracked viewport of her flagship as her world, Aurelian Prime, dissolved into a river of molten glass. The cries of billions folded into the static of space. For the Aurelian clade, once artisans of light and keepers of peace, there were no sanctuaries left. Their armadas, once a lattice of elegance and precision, lay as drifting bones across the void. 5 million souls. That was all that remained of a civilization older than Earth's pyramids. Serenya's hands trembled as she adjusted the failing engines. "We can't run forever," whispered her first officer, a scaled youth named Vaen. "We can try," she murmured. "Until someone remembers mercy." They sent pleas into the dark. To the Vorthan legates, who once called them allies, no answer. To the crystalline Trell, silence. Even the Assembly of 12 sealed their gates, fearing the Dominion's wrath. Then, across the last stretch of black, an unassuming blue-green world replied. Earth. The message was short, in crisp standard galactic. "We have heard your call. Set your course to Sol. You will be safe. No crest, no demand, no condition. Just coordinates and trust." Serenya stared at the transmission for hours. "It's a trap," Vaen said flatly. "Perhaps," she replied, eyes reflecting the starlight. "But even traps have light. And we are tired of the dark." The journey took 19 cycles. Their reactors coughed dust, their navigation arrays flickered with ghost signals. Yet when the fleet breached the Sol Gate, what awaited them was not the void's cold indifference, it was order. Thousands of Terran ships hung in silence. Matte black hulls gleamed like obsidian blades around a vibrant Earth that shimmered beneath auroras. Not a weapon aimed at them, yet every gun ready. A human voice filled the comms. "This is Commander Lucian Kane of the Terran Coalition. Identify yourselves, and fear not. You are under Earth's protection." His tone was calm, almost too calm. Serenya felt something ancient stir within her, hope mixed with awe. "I am Serenya Vaen of the Aurelian clade," she answered. "We come, seeking shelter." "Then you have found it," Kane said. "Follow our beacon. Dock at Mars Orbital Platform 12. You will not be harmed." When their ships entered the crimson orbit of Mars, humans didn't board them with demands. They brought food, warmth, medicine. Engineers repaired their hulls before asking a single question. Serenya walked among Terran workers, men and women with grease-stained hands and steady smiles, and wondered why. Later that night, she met Lucian Kane in the docking corridor. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform simple yet regal. "You don't trust us," he said. "Should I?" she asked. His gaze softened. "No. But stay long enough, and you might." Kane's presence was not loud, it was gravity. Wherever he stood, the corridor seemed to straighten, the humming lights to hold their breath. Serenya matched his pace along the viewport, where Mars hung like a slumbering ember. "You are different from the other human commanders I've met," she said. "You've met none," he replied, lips almost curving. "True. But I've read your histories." She swept a hand toward Earth, a blue lantern beyond the glass. "You rise, burn, break, and rise again. Why answer our call?" Kane took a moment. "Because someone answered ours," he said. "Long ago, when Europa's habitats failed and the old colonies turned their backs, strangers towed our lifeboats into orbit and asked nothing in return. They're gone now. But their lesson isn't." He stopped beside an observation node. On the panel, silent icons pulsed, relief schedules, docking assignments, repair queues. "You'll be offered refugee status, protection, and citizenship courts once you're settled," he added. "For now, rest." Serenya studied his profile, the cut-glass calm, the well-worn edges of a man who trusted structures because feelings could not be trusted to hold. "Rest will come after purpose," she said. He looked at her then, truly looked, as if measuring a constellation. "Purpose we can arrange. Earth did not debate our worth. They drafted plans. Orbital shipyards grown to life from Mercury to Titan. Terran tugs hauled ice from Europa, automated forges on Luna spat girders like steel rain. Swarms of drones braided atmosphere in tanks the size of cities. They called the project Havenframe, a seed world to be grown in the Proxima Centauri system, a place the Aurelians could shape into home. Serenya walked the scaffolds of Mars Shipyard 12 with human engineers. A freckled woman named Myra shoved a hard hat into her hands. "Regulations," she said. "Also, keeps your ears warm." She winked, and Serenya laughed for the first time in years. At the end of the gantry, Lucian waited beside a projected model, a worldlet spun from captured rock, cored with carbon frameworks, wrapped in a magnetosphere lattice. He gestured to the crown of stations that would guard it. "We build the roof while you make the house," he said. "Why put your fleet between us and the Dominion?" Serenya asked. "They'll come." "Peace without guardrails," Kane replied. "Is a cliff and fog." She nodded, unexpectedly moved. "Then we'll plant gardens on the cliff." His eyes warmed. "And we'll keep the fog honest." The convoy translated into Proxima's thin light like pilgrims into a chapel. The raw planet spun below. The engineers labeled it Eden 3, but Serenya called a council. Names mattered. Names were anchors against oblivion. Children suggested words of glow and fruit. Elders chose terms that tasted like grief. In the end, a little Aurelian girl with silver braids whispered a word that meant the light that returns after storm, Astri. Terrans etched it into the registry. Drones swarmed. Towers grew from asteroid marrow. Atmospheric processors unfurled like luminous flowers, bleeding sky into a world that had never tasted breath. Lakes pooled in impact basins, green bled across plains. The first Aurelian homes rose, curving halls and open plazas that sang quietly when the wind moved through them. Serenya walked barefoot along a shoreline that didn't exist 3 months before and pressed her palms to the newborn sand. Vaen stood beside her, dilating his cobalt pupils. "You did this," he said. "We did," she corrected, glancing up at the Terran rigs hovering like guardian birds. Lucian joined them at dusk. "Test shelters are ready. Food labs online. Defense grid at 41%. "And your sleep?" Serenya asked. He lifted one shoulder. "Comes when called. Sometimes. Then I'll call it for you," she said softly. He answered with a look that felt like doors opening in a quiet house. The Aegis crown, a chain of orbital bastions linked by quantum relays, began to encircle Astri. Terran artificers called each fortress by an old Earth city: Carthage, Samarkand, Kyoto, Timbuktu. Rail batteries nodded along their spines like patient beasts. Projected shields stitched a pale aurora across the night. During calibration, a conduit ruptured. Fire tore through a maintenance truss. Without thinking, Serenya leapt from the walkway and caught a tumbling human tech by the strap of his harness. The world went weightless and loud. Then a hand closed around her forearm, iron sure. Lucian dragged them both to safety. Sirens wailed. Smoke bit her lungs. His gloved fingers didn't release her until the alarms faded. "You're reckless," he said, voice low. "You're welcome," she replied, breathless. His gaze flicked to the rescue tech, to the burn on her wrist she hadn't noticed. He removed a glove and wrapped a sterile ribbon around the blister with soldierly tenderness. "Don't make a habit of terrifying me," he murmured. "Is that an order, Commander?" "A plea," he admitted. The word hung between them like a bridge they might one day cross. The first settlers wrote messages and tucked them into the roots of Astri's saplings. "For the ones who come after," the tradition went. "So they'll know we loved them before they were born." Terrans joined in, their handwriting angular and earnest. Serenya found Lucian one evening standing alone beneath a half-built skydock, a folded paper in his hand. "Who did you write to?" she asked. "My mother," he said. "She used to say the future is just a child that needs good stories." "And did you give it one?" "I told it about a princess with foxfire eyes who kept insisting on carrying beams heavier than she is." She laughed. A princess? You are royalty of a kind, he said so simply that the title felt natural. And I. He broke off, searching. I was born to hold walls. Then hold this one with me, she said, and together they set the letter in the soil. The Dominion found us faster than projections. A braided knot of warp signatures clawed into the system like talons. CLY our warlord Saith spoke across every frequency in a voice like cracked stone. Return our quarry. The Aurelians belong to us. Lucian's orders snapped through the net, sleek, spare, absolute. The Aegis crown flared, shields thickening to opal. Evac protocols whisked children into caverns below Astri's crust. Serenya stood on the command deck of Kyoto beside him, her pulse steady and wild all at once. Open a channel, Kane said. Saith's predatory mask filled the main display. Human, he spat. You stand between a hunter and its meal. The universe isn't your larder, Lucian answered. Leave Astri. Now. You would die for alien refuse? Lucian's eyes cooled. You misunderstand, he said. We do not die for them. We live with them. That is harder. The Dominion fleet lunged. Space detonated. Plasma storms clawed at the shields, rail strikes howled. Nothing touched ground. The crown took the blows and sang. Return fire, Lucian ordered. Carthage spat a lance of gravitic light that folded 3 cruisers into bright silence. Timbuktu stitched the dark with kinetic needles. And then Kyoto, their station, shuddered. A Dominion boarding spear punched through an outer ring. Lucian glanced at Serenya. She was already moving. With me, he said. Always, she answered, and drew the curved Aurelian blade she had sworn never to use again. They met the boarders in a spiral corridor where gravity misbehaved. CLY shock troopers, armored in glassy black, jaws hinged too wide, rushed the choke point. Lucian's squad formed a wedge around him. Serenya slid through the gaps like wind through chimes. Steel and light kissed and screamed. A trooper lunged for a young Terran private. Serenya pivoted, blade flashing, and the corridor sparked with the sound of an empire refusing to die. Lucian's rifle hummed in crisp, economical bursts. He moved with the same measured grace as his words, a man who saved violence for when it mattered and made it matter completely. Breach sealed. Kane Myra's voice over comms, breathless and fierce. Crown integrity at 87%. Good, Lucian said. Lock them out and keep them angry. On it. The last trooper fell. Serenya leaned against the bulkhead, chest heaving, the old ache of memory scraping her ribs. Lucian stepped close, not touching, presence steady as a railing. You all right? I broke the vow I made on Aurelian, she whispered. To never raise a blade again. You raised it for a home, he said. Vows evolve when people do. Her gaze flicked to his. And you, Lucian Kane, what vow holds you up? He considered. To be the wall that keeps the fire out, he said finally. And the door that opens to friends. She smiled, heart clenching. Then be both. For me. Gladly, he said, and meant it like a promise spoken to the stars. The Dominion broke on the crown and scattered into the black. Saith's flagship limped for the edge of the system, trailing a corona of wounded pride. Terran patrols did not pursue. Lucian's orders were simple. Hold. Heal. Learn. On Astri's surface, the night sky shimmered with soft residue from the shield's work, like a net of aurora tucked around a sleeping child. Refugees came out of the caverns blinking and laughing and crying all at once. Vaen danced ankle-deep in a lake that hadn't existed that morning. Serenya found Lucian alone on a cliff above the newborn sea. He watched the waves assemble themselves, patient and sure. She stood beside him until the silence felt shared. You were right, she said at last. Peace needs guardrails. And gardens, he added, nodding toward the valley, where Terrans and Aurelians planted at dawn. Serenya turned to him. The wind teased his dark hair. Starlight sketched his cheekbones in quiet silver. You never asked for thanks, she said. Thanks are fragile, he replied. I prefer structures. She reached for his hand. He didn't flinch. Then here is a structure, she said, lacing her fingers with his. Call it the Aurelian Covenant. He looked down at their joined hands as if they were a blueprint. What are its terms? We live. We build. We defend. Together. Lucian's smile was small and unstoppable. Ratified, he said. Months unspilled like new silk. Astri Prime, the capital, grew where sea and prairie shook hands. Streets arced in gentle curves so wind could sing. Marketplaces flowered under canopies that shifted color with weather. Schools taught Terran physics in the morning and Aurelian harmonics in the afternoon. The city learned its residents' names. Doorways brightened as people approached, lamps warmed for tired hands, fountains quieted to hear secrets. Children of both peoples raced through gardens, unbothered by categories. A Terran carpenter taught an Aurelian sculptor how to make wood say yes. An Aurelian healer taught a Terran medic how to hear pain before it spoke. Serenya took on the role of Envoy Queen, a title she protested and then wore lightly, like a crown made of sunrise. Lucian remained commander, but the word began to mean keeper more than killer. Their councils were full of arguments that ended in dinners. One evening, as red twilight pooled in the streets, a storm rose sudden and fierce. Lightning crawled across the crown like ink. Myra's voice cracked over the net. Quantum Relay 3 is spiking. If it blows, we'll have a hole big enough for a fleet. On our way, Lucian said. Serenya caught his shoulder. You don't have to be the wall every hour of the day. I don't, he agreed softly, covering her hand with his. But I want to be when it matters. Then I'll be the door, she said, and kissed him as the thunder rolled. They separated laughing and ran. Repairs held. The crown quieted. Astri slept. Lucian and Serenya walked the shoreline where they had first named the world, bare feet in warm surf. He told her about his childhood in a shipyard city where cranes were the only constellations that didn't lie. She told him about Aurelians' festival of rivers, when lanterns were set adrift to teach children the art of letting go. We are not what we were, she said, eyes on the lantern she'd set upon the water. But we are not lost. He slid an arm around her shoulders. You are found, he said, and the word felt like the beginning of a map. Above them, the Aegis crown glowed, a patient coronet of light. Beyond it, somewhere in the dark, Warlord Saith plotted and nursed his wound. Tomorrow, they would design embassies and dispute fishing rights and argue about music in the public squares. Tomorrow, they would test new shield geometries and teach children why mathematics could taste like honey if you were careful with your tongue. Tonight they were two people who had carried too much fire and finally found a place to set it down. Home, Serenya whispered. Home, Lucian agreed, and the sea, brand new and already ancient, answered back. Rumors whispered through the trade lanes. Saith was rebuilding, gathering mercenaries and forbidden code. Fragments of the Dominion survived, splinters that gnawed at the edges of peace. Terran scouts intercepted ghost signals, broken coordinates, promises of vengeance. On Astri, no one spoke of fear. But Serenya felt it in the way engineers walked faster between shifts, in the way Lucian's hand lingered on the railing each time he left for orbit. One evening, she found him at the command terrace overlooking the Aegis network. They're coming, she said quietly. They always come, he answered. His eyes, normally steady as tempered steel, were rimmed in exhaustion. But next time, we meet them on our terms. Meaning? He pointed toward the horizon where shield emitters glowed like moons. We're preparing something. A defense lattice that uses folded gravity instead of radiation barriers. It'll bend fire into emptiness. But it's untested. And dangerous? He gave a faint smile. You wouldn't believe me if I said no. Then don't, she said. I'd rather hear the truth and stand beside it. He turned, studying her face. You always stand beside the storm. Not beside, Serenya said. Within. For a long time neither spoke. Beyond them, the stars hummed like an audience holding its breath. The rumor began as a whisper among traders. A Terran admiral had sold access codes to the Dominion. By the time it reached Astri, it had grown teeth. A supply convoy vanished near the Kuiper Rim, and suspicion coiled like smoke. In council chambers carved from glass stone, human officers and Aurelian envoys argued until language itself seemed to bleed. Serenya watched tempers rise, then rise higher. "Enough," she said, voice sharp as wind. "Fear is a blade that cuts its wielder." Lucian's jaw worked silently beside her. Afterward, in the empty hallway, she touched his arm. "You don't believe this," she said. "I don't know what to believe," he admitted. "But someone is feeding them intel. That's fact." She frowned. "Do you trust your own?" "I trust individuals," he said, eyes steady on hers. "Not institutions. Not anymore." "And me?" His silence stretched until it became an answer all its own. Finally he said, "You, I trust beyond reason. That's what scares me." "Then let it," she whispered. "We build bridges out of fear, Lucian. Or walls. Choose the bridge." The traitor revealed himself not with a confession but with a signal, a burst of coded light from the asteroid rings. The Dominion returned in silence, cloaked in warped space. By the time Terran's sensors screamed, it was almost too late. Setha's fleet didn't come for conquest this time. It came for vengeance. Missiles struck the outer moons. Mining stations disintegrated. The crown flared to life, but one node, Samarkand, didn't respond. Its defense grid was dark. Lucian was already in motion. "Patched me to the fleet. Evac protocols Gamma 1. I want that fortress back online." Serenya met his gaze. "I'm going with you." "No," he said. "This isn't diplomacy. Nor is it mercy." Her voice was calm steel. "You'll need someone who understands what Seth wants." He hesitated, then nodded once. "Arm up. We leave in 10. The shuttle ride to Samarkand was a breath held between lives. Serenya strapped him beside Lucian, her pulse syncing with the hum of the engines. Through the viewport, Astri dwindled into a star jewel framed by the crown's glowing ring. "Remind me why we're not bringing a full battalion," she said. "Too slow," he answered. "By the time backup arrives, Seth will have what he came for." "And what's that?" Lucian's expression hardened. "Me." The admission hung like frost. "Why you?" "Because I built the lattice he fears. He thinks killing me will break the covenant." Serenya shook her head. "Then he's never watched a world of ours rebuild." He glanced sidelong, a flicker of warmth amid the tension. "You have an answer for everything. Only when the universe forgets to." The shuttle docked. The station loomed silent, lights flickering like dying hearts. Inside Samarkand, corridors floated with debris, shattered panels, drifting tools, blood blooming in slow-motion globes. The gravity field stuttered. Lucian raised his rifle, motioning forward. "Stay close." "I wasn't planning to drift away," Serenya replied, drawing her curved blade. A soft chime echoed, then static. Myra's voice burst through their calms, faint and broken. "Lucian! Dominion boarding teams, multiple vectors, watch the..." The signal cut. They moved deeper. In the command hub, a body turned slowly in the air, a human officer. In his hand, a data shard blinked red. Serenya reached out, catching it between two fingers. The encryption bore Dominion script. Lucian cursed softly. He was the leak. Serenya met his eyes. "Then Seth won't stop until he sees the end of you." "Then let him come close," Lucian said, voice gone cold. "Closer than he can survive." The Dominion troops breached from the aft hangar in a wave of black armor. Lucian's commands were surgical. "Flank right. Seal bulkhead delta. Reroute atmosphere flow." Each word a blueprint of precision under fire. Serenya fought beside him, her movements fluid, almost balletic. Her blade traced arcs of light through the zero-G haze. When a plasma bolt grazed her arm, Lucian pulled her behind cover, pressing a med seal to the wound. "You're bleeding," he said. "So are you," she replied, pointing at a scorch mark across his shoulder plate. He grinned through the smoke. "Trade scars later? After we live." Together, they pushed toward the core chamber. Lucian activated the emergency protocol. The station's gravity anchors detonated, pulling the Dominion troops into a spiraling void. The soundless implosion tore them from existence. When silence returned, Serenya leaned against the console, breathing hard. "You risked the whole station." "I risked myself," he said. "Not you, Lucian," she whispered. "Don't make me a thing you protect. Make me a reason you fight." He reached for her hand, gloved fingers trembling. "You already are." When they returned to Astri, the people met them with a roar of relief. The battle had cost lives, but the crown held. The Dominion withdrew into shadow once more. At the council, Serenya stood beside Lucian as they addressed both races. "We are bound not by species," she said, "but by survival earned together. Let this stand as the first law of our shared dawn: no world falls alone." Lucian's deep voice followed, resonant and calm. "This covenant isn't a treaty. It's a vow. From this day forward, Earth and Astri will be one defense, one promise." Cheers thundered through the hall. Later, when the crowds had gone, Serenya approached Lucian by the balcony. "You gave them more than peace," she said. "You gave them faith." "I gave them work to do," he replied. "Faith is what you gave me." "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I'm learning to live within the storm." Years later, when the Dominion returned for one final assault, Astri was ready. The Aegis crown had grown into a full halo, a living fortress that could bend gravity itself. Setha's armada cracked open the dark, vast and terrible. Yet what met them wasn't fear. It was unity. Human and Aurelian ships rose side by side. The crown ignited, channeling light into a single radiant spear that split the void. Serenya stood on the bridge of her flagship Vanguard of Dawn, Lucian beside her. "You could have stayed on Earth," she said. "I told you once," he answered. "I don't run from the fire. I build around it." The final battle lasted 8 hours. When the light faded, the Dominion was gone, its warships vaporized, its name reduced to history's dust. Astri endured. Humanity endured. And at the heart of the peace that followed were two figures, one human, one alien, whose story would be told for millennia. "Home," Serenya whispered once more. "Always," Lucian replied. And above them, the halo burned eternal, a promise carved into the skin of the cosmos. Peace came quietly, like dawn through broken shutters. Years passed, and the scars of war became part of Astri's architecture. Plaza tiles embedded with fragments of old hulls, gardens planted over crater rims, memorial towers that sang when the wind touched them. Humanity and Aurelians lived side by side, their languages bleeding into one another until words like hope, home, and family meant the same in both tongues. Lucian and Serenya often walked the outer terraces together, their reflections merging in the glass. From there they could see the halo of the Aegis crown gleaming like a patient sun. "It still feels impossible," she said once, watching cargo ships thread through its light. "Impossible is the first step of every human project," he said, smiling. "We just don't always stop once it's finished. And Aurelians don't always know when to begin," she replied softly. "Perhaps we were waiting for you. Or we were waiting for each other," he said. The Covenant needed more than memory, it needed knowledge. Together, the two species founded the Astrian Academy, a floating institution orbiting above the capital. Human scientists taught Aurelian psionic engineers how to sculpt fields without machines. Aurelian artists taught Terrans how to make architecture hum. Lucian lectured occasionally, though he hated the title Prince of Iron. Serenya presided over the council but still found time to wander the academy halls, trailing students like a curious ghost. One afternoon she found Lucian in a simulation dome, teaching cadets how to think under fire. "You talk about battle as if it's meditation," she teased. "It is," he said, folding his arms. In war, clarity is rare. I want them to find it before they ever touch a real weapon. And when they do, then I want them to remember who taught them not to hate. Serenya touched his cheek. You already won that war. He caught her hand. Not yet, he murmured. But every sunrise helps. A century later, long after Lucian's hair had silvered and Serenya's glow had softened to the color of moonlight, the first outsiders came. Ships of unknown design, sleek, winged things that moved without thrust, drifted into the system and sent a single message. We seek the builders of Astri. We have seen what you've done. The newcomers called themselves the Velan, nomads who had once feared humanity's rise. But when they heard of Astri's defense, of the crown built not for conquest but protection, curiosity replaced dread. Serenya greeted them personally at the orbital ring. You expected a fortress, she said, and found a home. One of the Velan ambassadors, his body half light and half matter, bowed low. We expected myth. We found memory instead. Lucian extended his hand. Then let's make more. And just like that, the covenant widened. The Terran, Aurelian alliance began building again, not empires, but sanctuaries. Worlds scarred by ancient wars were rekindled, moons once mined hollow were refilled with forests and lakes. Humanity's restless creativity met Aurelian patience, and together they turned the galaxy into a garden tended by shared history. At first, Serenya struggled with the scale of it all. We were meant to survive, she said one night. Not to lead. Lucian looked up from the star maps spread across their table. Survival was the first test, he said. Now comes stewardship. And if we fail? Then someone after us will do better, he said. That's how stories work. Her smile returned, slow and certain. Then let's give them a good chapter to begin with. It was Serenya's idea to visit the world that had first said come to us. The journey took only hours now. Humanity's drives had grown efficient, almost quiet. Earth was both familiar and new, oceans bluer, skies clearer, cities layered like living reefs. At the base of the Atlantic arcology stood a monument of pale stone. Carved into it were the words of Admiral Sloane, the woman whose mercy had begun everything. Peace without protection is a pause between wars. Lucian ran his fingers across the engraving. She understood what we only learn through pain, he said. Serenya rested her head against his shoulder. And still she chose to build. They stood there until the tide reached their boots, and for once neither of them spoke. Generations grew that no longer saw difference as boundary. The new children of Astri, half human, half Aurelian, were born with eyes that shimmered between blue and gold, and voices that could sing in chords. They called themselves Starborn. One of them, a bright-eyed girl named Miriel, approached Lucian during a commemoration ceremony. Grand Commander, she said solemnly, is it true the Dominion once burned worlds for sport? He crouched to her height. Yes. And it's true we rebuilt them. Then what should we do when another Dominion comes? Lucian smiled gently. Remember that you're not alone. That's what we built all this for. Serenya watched from the crowd, tears glinting like tiny moons in her eyes. Even legends grow old. Lucian's hands began to shake, his stride slowed. The doctors offered replacements, synthetic extensions, but he refused them. Steel already lives in the sky, he said. Let my bones stay honest. Serenya remained unchanged by time, save for the soft fading of her radiance. She stayed by his side in the garden overlooking Astri's twin sons. Do you regret it? She asked. Regret? He smiled faintly. No. We built what I once thought impossible. That's enough for one life. When you go, she said quietly, the stars will miss you. Then make sure they don't stay lonely, he whispered. He died that night, his last breath a sigh of contentment. The crown dimmed its lights for one full rotation in mourning. Across 1,000 worlds, bells made of metal and memory rang in harmony. Serenya carried his ashes into orbit. At the heart of the crown, she opened the urn and let the dust scatter through the gravity fields. The particles caught the light, forming a glowing path that circled Astri. "This is your home," she whispered, "and I will guard it, as you guarded me." Later, in council records, that day would be marked as the ascension of Kane. But Serenya never used that title. To her, he remained simply Lucian, the man who had answered a stranger's cry and turned it into eternity. Centuries later, historians would argue whether the Aurelian covenant had been the dawn of an empire or the rebirth of compassion itself. On distant colonies, they still repeated Lucian's creed. "We do not die for them, we live with them." Each time a refugee fleet appeared on the horizon of a strange sun, someone would whisper, "Call Astri." And across the light years, a signal would come back, carrying words older than any anthem. "Come to us. You will be safe." The cycle continued. The story became scripture. On the 1000th anniversary of Astri's founding, a young archivist wandered the silent halls of the Academy of Light. She paused before two statues, one of a tall human in a long coat, the other of a slender alien woman with fox-like eyes. Beneath them, etched into the plinth, was an inscription in both tongues. "Home is not where you're born. It's where humanity finds you." The archivist smiled, touched the letters, and whispered a prayer not to gods but to people who had refused extinction. Outside, the Aegis crown still burned around Astri like a promise kept. And far beyond it, in galaxies yet unseen, there were voices beginning to whisper again, voices that would one day find a signal from the stars, and a single line of text pulsing across the void. "Come to us." And they would. Because in the end, humanity had become what it always dreamed of being: home.